this episode is another episode of Canadian Horror Heads, eh?
Is this really a Canadian movie?
It is a Canadian movie. Well,
I did not catch that.
I don't know if it technically is a Canadian movie, but it was filmed in British Columbia.
Oh, okay.
And we're talking about 1986's April Fool's Day.
Another one of those seasonal slasher films that the 80s. If you were part of the 80s, you know that pretty much every holiday got swept up into the slasher film craze that was going on.
And I don't even know if April Fool's Day. I think April Fool's Day kind of falls in line with a lot of those ones that were not even holidays, but significant days of the year. Because I know there was like a graduation day, a Mother's Day, a happy birthday to me, all that crap.
Yeah. And
I don't know if I would technically even really consider this one a slasher movie. And even though I know it's a horror movie, classifying it as a horror movie almost feels a little wrong to me.
Yeah, well, I would say that this falls into the slasher category. Although, follows the formula. You get teenagers out together, you get them going out on their own, and murder occurring, and an unknown killer. So I would definitely categorize this as a slasher film. One thing that surprised me, I don't know why, I was actually pretty surprised that this was rated R. I thought it was a PG-13 back in the day, but I was mistaken.
There's a little bit of gore in it, but not too much.
Did you see the remake of this?
I have never seen the remake of this, and from what I've heard, it's kind of like Prom Night, where it doesn't follow the original at all.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, I never saw the remake either.
If you're watching this and you're expecting like a real suspenseful, edge of your seat type of horror movie, this is not it at all. This is one of those classic 80s slow burners, if you will.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I was actually watching the clock the last time I watched this, and there's one scene towards the beginning of the movie where there's a accident a boating accident at the very beginning of the movie. But then if you take that out, nothing actually happens in the movie until about 42 minutes into the movie.
Yeah, this movie was kind of a drag to revisit. I don't know if I ever wanted to go back to watching it. I saw it once back in what was it, 6th grade, 6th or 7th grade. I saw it. No, 7th grade. I'm sorry. I remember being able to get through it back then. This time watching it again, 30 years later or something, it was very, very difficult to stay focused. The thing that stands out the most of my viewing experience of watching this movie was that it was weird to see it in HD on a big screen TV for some reason. And it was also nice to see Amy Steele on the screen again. Those were the two things that I take away.
The next thing I was going to mention, that friend of the show, Amy Steele, is in it, which I think is one of the reasons why I suggested it. Actually, I know that's one of the reasons why I suggested it, because after we recorded our last time, and then we were thinking of movies for this time, and I actually suggested it because of Amy Steele, and I wasn't sure because this movie falls into the same category with quite a few movies that we should talk about on here, because as we've discussed on here several times, we've been horror fans since we were very young, but there are a lot of movies, even from back in that time, that came out in the mid 80s that we never had anything to do with when we were, whatever, 10, 12, 13 years old. And so I didn't know if you actually knew anything about this movie, because this is one of those movies growing up that I couldn't tell you the first time I saw this movie. It's one of those that I watched once, didn't really have any burning desire to watch it at any other time since then until, we decided to do it for this show. And obviously we're doing it now because, April Fool's Day is coming up here in a couple of days. So I guess that depends on when you're listening to this episode. If you're listening to this episode on April 2nd, April Fool's Day is coming up on 365 days or 364 days or whatever.
I completely stalked the horror movie shelves all my childhood. That was I remember it was go to all right. Should we explain what a video store is to everybody?
What?
Because that's I think that's talking about at this point in reality, it's you're trying to explain what an 8-track is or.
Well, you just gotta imagine you go to Netflix or Amazon Prime, and instead of thumbing through the pages of different movies that you want to watch, just imagine that those are actual physical copies of the movie, and rather than being on your screen, they're on a shelf in a room.
Yeah, so instead of it would be if you could transport yourself into your TV screen on your Netflix channel, and instead of being sitting on your bed or your couch flipping through, you're actually inside the TV, and all around you is the movies, and you can pick them up physically and look at them and say, I want this one or that one, and then you take them up to a front counter somewhere where there's somebody waiting to check the video out for you. That's what a video store was back in the day, before Skynet took over and whatever.
My favorite thing about going to a video store or even a movie theater, even in this day and age, not that I go to the video store too awful much, even though we still have a family video here in town, but
yeah, we do too.
They really need to do what Home Depot does, or some of those places. You really need to have experts working there. I'm sorry, but if I take a movie up to the front counter and I'm gonna rent it out, or or buy it off of the previously viewed section or whatever, and you have some 25-year-old kid there trying to get snarky with me about, this isn't that great of a movie or something. Dude, you don't know what the hell you're talking about.
The video store experience was one of the most awesome experiences of my life. And unfortunately, I haven't been going to family video in a while. I've succumbed to the Matrix.
Yep.
And I'm now part of Amazon and Netflix and laying on my bed, clicking stuff. So, well, let's put it this way. When video stores first came out, mom and pop families just would buy a business and start their own thing. And there was just you go to an old tavern, and there's a tavern on every corner and blah, blah, blah. And Joe's stumble in or whatever, that's kind of what the video store thing was. You go to every town, and there'd be these video stores, and they'd be unique to they're whatever. It's just a family owned or whatever video store. So you'd walk in, and I remember I would instantly a magnet gravitate to the horror section. It was I would just right there, and my parents would hate that, but that's just what I did. There's the horror section. Those are the movies I want to see, and 90% of them they wouldn't let me see, but that's where I would go. And those movies and the boxes of those VHS films were on display, and you would get to check out look at the movies and like look at the back, and they maybe have 3 or 4 pictures, like stills from the film, and like the synopsis of the film on the back, and that's kind of what the whole point of that's what their advertisement for you to rent that film. Well, April Fool's Day was one of those films that I remember always being there, because it was 85, 86 that this came out, so it was on the shelf for a long, long time. And, and I just remember always walking in the video stores and seeing April Fool's Day, and, oh yeah, I got to check that one out. So that's like kind of like ingrained in my brain is that cover art of the girl with the holding the knife behind her back and her ponytail into the shape of a noose, and like looking over at the like big table of all her friends. And I didn't know what it was about and all that, but like again, back in that day, like the box art was so influential, and it kind of really made up your mind of whether or not you wanted to see it. And we all were Halloween, Friday the 13th fans, so it was like, oh, April Fool's Day, that must be another slasher. I got to go check that out.
I would think that outside of the big horror movies of the time, the Friday the 13th, the Halloweens, Nightmare on Elm Streets, Texas Chainsaw Massacres, this box art or cover art or whatever you want to call it, I think is probably one of the most memorable. I mean, if you were to do like one of those stupid online quizzes of, can you name this artwork for this horror movie? I would think that this one, especially for people of a certain age, 39 and above, would be able to pick it out pretty quick. But yeah, that's the same thing with me. Every time I see it, I'm like, April Fool's Day.
Yeah, I remember picking this box up quite a few times and looking at it and reading the back and all of that stuff. There was a lot of cool box art back then. But yeah, this was one of the, and I guess like for me, like my favorite horror subgenre is the slasher. That's kind of like, you and I's age group. That's sort of, late 70s, 80s. That's what we jumped into. Like that's what we kind of were raised with, is the slasher era. Like, early horror, like our parents, they grew up with the monsters. All the classic monsters. That was what horror was back then. And then you and I, our age group was the human monsters, and which were the slashers. And then now, like, then the next decade was the 90s. We just don't even we pretend that doesn't exist. Then you go into the 2000s, and you've got the horror, like the Saws and the Hostels and all of that, and then you got the supernatural thing with The Ring and Paranormal Activity and all that, and those films. But you and I were like, just our horror education, or if you want to call it, came from the slasher subgenre. I mean, it was Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Child's Play, My Bloody Valentine, April Fool's Day. It really was that, I mean, there was every once in a while, like, they would bring a monster back, like, they had the werewolf thing with An American Werewolf and The Howling, or they had the vampire thing, like with The Lost Boys or Fright Night. But those were kind of like the separate from what was the trend, which was the slasher. So April Fool's Day just kind of, to me, falls right into that.
Yeah, this movie is pretty straightforward. It's basically a group of college kids who are on, I guess it's like a spring break, I guess, almost kind of thing. And they're on this like weekend getaway at, it's almost like a private island, really, more than anything. One of their classmates invites everybody over to this little island that they are like their house, but they have to get a ferry ride over. And then turns out, of course, that there is a killer on the loose. And they can't get off of the island until Monday. One of the things going into this movie, especially as when you're going back and revisiting later, the title of the movie kind of gives everything away. I mean, it's called April Fool's Day, so...
Yeah, that's a giveaway.
I mean, it's... it's a big joke, guys. Just kidding. Like I said, it's leading up to April Fool's Day in the movie, and so you have all these hoity-toity, yuppie, preppy white kids going to a private estate on this little private island, and the girl that invited everybody over is kind of planted throughout the house all these little April Fool's gags. Some of them were pretty funny, like there was one scene where a couple of the kids had whoopee cushions like on their chair, and sit down at like the dinner table, and everybody's like, oh, ho, 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 and stuff like that. Overall, I mean, honestly, the movie itself, like we were saying before, is trying to cash in on a lot of the stuff that was already going on in the 80s at that time. So you had, this is 1986 when this comes out. So you had the success of Halloween. You've had the success of Friday the 13th. Even though it's not based off of a holiday at all, 1986 comes around and you have the success of Freddy Krueger coming out of nowhere. And
yeah, this is like already 2 movies in.
Right. And, by the mid 80s, like we were talking about earlier, so you had everybody trying to make these movies then to kind of get, cash in on the slasher craze. Like, oh, we got to make a movie about every holiday of the year.
And, this one was kind of like I think it was a pretty formulaic film. I don't think it was, anything really, nothing really sticks out in this movie. That's probably why most people don't go back to it and say, yeah, this is one of those films that I wouldn't even say this is a must-see 80s slasher film. I think this is like for people like you and me who are kind of raised in this era. I think you and I should see it. People who want to kind of catch up with all the 80s slasher films, but outside of that, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, unless you're an Amy Steele fan, though. And that's another thing to look at too. Amy Steele, one of our mutual friends, right?
Her and Melanie Kinnaman both, I would say, are friends of this show.
Yeah, they're both great.
The one thing I will say about Amy Steele in this movie is she looked
very
like
cute.
Well, she is a very attractive girl in this movie, but she also looked like she was just coming off of shooting a bad 80s hairband video shoot.
She probably was.
She had the feathered hair and
and the tie.
Oh yeah, that's right. The tie, and wasn't she wearing a faded denim jacket at one point?
I missed that.
I'm sure she was.
Wasn't she in a bikini in one scene too? Maybe not. Maybe I'm thinking of Friday the 13th Part 2.
No, she was not. She was maybe in a swimsuit, if anything. I don't think she... Yeah, she was... There was a scene with her where her and her boyfriend were going to get it on the floor of the beach house.
Okay.
And that's what I was thinking too. I'm like, oh, we're going to get to see Amy Steele in her underwear? And then the dead body floats underneath them.
That's right. What do you say about this film overall? What do you?
Well, the first, probably good 3/4 of the movie is really, really, really just a bunch of kids, white privileged brats sitting around in this big ass house, just, being spoiled brats. And then stuff does start to happen. You have a couple of, again, this is in the mid 80s, so this is right around the time frame that stuff was heavily edited. You know, like you were saying before, you're surprised it was an R rating. I mean, nowadays this stuff could probably get put on TV and
easily, yeah.
You know,
I don't think there was anything that would have not been passed on on a TV.
But you know, some of the stuff that did happen was okay. You know, there's really nothing in the movie at all that's memorable, really. I mean,
yeah, that's the hardest part about this film is I can't even think of anything that it was I mean, there's the well scene that kind of sticks out. That's probably it for me.
There's a couple of things in the movie that are worth making mention of. One of them being that you have this guy, or not this guy, but you have this one of the teenagers, or in his early 20s or whatever they are. He supposedly calls and he's talking to the police, and the police chief or whatever tells him, be aware or be careful of Muffy, who is like the girl that's hosting this weekend getaway. And everybody stay together. Don't split up. And so what does he do? Doesn't tell anybody about the conversation he just had with the police guy. And then he's the first one to go off on his own.
Yeah, that's how it works.
So the movie's 30 years old, so if you haven't seen it by now, then too bad.
Oh, let it out.
But, you know, so the end of the movie, of course, is, which honestly isn't a surprise because, again, the movie is called April Fool's Day. Amy Steele and her love interest in the movie, they are the two final people that are still kicking at the end of the movie, and Amy Steele bursts into one of the rooms in this giant house on this private island, and lo and behold, all of the characters throughout the movie that have been picked off one by one are all sitting around yucking it up, and she comes to realize that, oh, this whole thing was like a gag. And then the boyfriend breaks into the room, and same thing, like, oh, wait, everybody's alive? Oh, that's weird. And then the lady that, or the girl that was hosting the weekend, she was like, yeah, I'm turning this estate into a murder mystery weekend getaway for people, and I wanted to try it out on you guys to see how you liked it. So, and then everybody's like, oh, ha, 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 good one. It was just a weird ending to the movie.
It really was.
And so it was one of those things where it gets over and you're like, so nothing happened? Nothing at all happened? Even the boat accident at the very beginning of the movie turns out, nope, that was fake too. Yeah, everything was fake.
Yeah, so you find out like, oh, it's all just gore effects then.
Unfortunately, I think the two of us, even though we took a journey back to the heyday of horror back in the mid-'80s, I might actually have to go with thumbs down on this one.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's a tough one, isn't it? What would you do if you didn't have a thumb? What would be your rating?
Well, you couldn't drive a car.
How about this? If you like Amy Steele, you need to go see this movie because it'll make everything worth it. But if you're not a fan of Amy Steele, then I recommend you stay away from the film. So what is that? How would I'm jumping out of our typical thumbs up, thumbs down rating.
No, I heard that as a thumbs down. That's what I heard.
All right, thumbs down. I'll have to do it. We'll have to do a like Friday the 13th Part 2 episode where we give it like praise and all kinds of stuff. And
all right, guys. So I think that wraps it up for this episode. So Amy Steele gets thumbs
up.
I was gonna say, what was that from Wayne's World back in the back in the day. Amy
Oh,
Steele
gee.
gets 2 swings up or whatever. And April Fool's Day gets 2 thumbs down.
Unfortunately. Hey, it's not our fault.